I'm Dr. David Monses, and I live here in Idaho. I am very much concerned about the transport of waste that would cross southern Idaho. Given that the company that has been handling this waste and will put the waste on trucks or trains has a terrible safety record, and given the joggling that will occur as this waste is transported across Idaho, it's not a question of if an accident will happen, but when. That is a huge amount of waste, 133,600 barrels worth of waste. It takes a lot of trucks and a lot of trains. And some of these containers the waste is coming in are plywood, and they've been sitting around for decades. If there is not spontaneous fire, there will at least be material that's lost. The contractor at Hanford has already been under the situation embarrassing that radioactive material has been found 2 to 4 miles away from the site after everything was supposed to be clean and good. It's just not happening, and this is extremely dangerous. And given secrecy, when will we know that there has been an accident or waste has been spilled? And what kind of cleanup procedures will they take? And how many people will be exposed before that happens? I have serious concerns, and I hope that our legislature and Mr. Wasden, who has been a great support legally in protecting our memorandum of understanding, that you take this danger into consideration, because safety seems to have been left out of the equation and talking about transporting this waste to Idaho and putting it on top of our aquifer. Thank you.
So, good evening. My name is Julie Hoffnagels. I'm from Boise, and I'm the president of the board of the Snake River Alliance at the moment. And I'd like to really thank Attorney General Wasden for upholding the '95 settlement agreement. 2 previous governors, Andrus and Batt, along with the Snake River Alliance and people of the state of Idaho, worked hard to bring this agreement to fruition. We've heard tonight from experts about the subject, so I don't need to reiterate the history or the problems. Idahoans have had a reprieve from unregulated waste coming into the state for 23 years now because of the agreement. I'm very grateful for that. No one feels good knowing that there's nuclear waste sitting over their aquifer for much of the southern part of the state. But this has been a measure of safety, the agreement has. And yet accidents happen. Just a couple of months ago, there were 4 barrels of waste at INL which spontaneously ruptured and had to be secured. Having barrels of uncharacterized nuclear waste transported over our highways and rail lines close to major population centers is completely unacceptable. Our land, water, and health are too precious to gamble with. I ask Attorney General Wasden, our other elected officials, to continue to respect the settlement agreement. I ask our fellow Idahoans to speak out and make your voices heard on this vital issue. Those who are here tonight are aware of the issue, but perhaps not all of our friends and neighbors are. If you're concerned, please let others know about what's at stake. Please sign the Don't Waste Idaho petition and encourage other Idahoans to do the same. So thank you so much for being here tonight.
Hello, Lawrence. My name is Philip Gordon. We are well known to one another as we have practiced law together in this city for a long time. And I have, as you well know, a great deal of respect for you, and I like to call you several times a year and tell you what a great job I think you're doing. And I've thought about the position you're in, and I know it's a very difficult one, and I've thought of what I think is a good analogy. And we all know the story of the little Dutch boy who, when his country was imperiled by floodwaters, put his finger in the dike and held it there until somebody could come and repair that. And in one sense, you're that equivalent. But with the little Dutch boy, there was nobody there saying, take your finger out, let the land be flooded, because it'll create great jobs in getting rid of the floodwaters. And there'll be so much money to be made in rebuilding the countryside. I appreciate that there is somebody there who's trying to tell you that you should allow the agreement to be undercut because it's going to create jobs. And I'm encouraging you very strongly, not only on behalf of me and the people I love in this state, but on behalf of the 300,000 people whose sole source of water is the Snake River Aquifer, to stand firm and to understand that there are many of us who have unbridled admiration for you, for your courage and your conviction and your willingness to keep your finger in the dike, to be the one who's stopping our state from being flooded with nuclear waste. And even though there are people saying to you, yeah, take your finger out, it'll be great, we can make a lot of money and there'll be a lot of jobs in fixing up the floodwaters and getting the waste out, as it were, stand firm, Lawrence. This is an issue of great, crucial significance to our state, and we appreciate your strength, your backbone, your fortitude, and your courage. Thank you.
My name's Tim Andrea. I live in Boise, and I'm in full agreement with everything else I've heard here tonight. It doesn't make sense to move this waste, and I guess it just makes me think about good boundaries and to consider taking the waste here. It's not in alignment with the seriousness of what nuclear waste is. And I've been to this site about 5 times, at least, I think, since 2012. I've gone almost every year. So, so maybe it's been 6. I'll go in a couple of weeks, and it'll be the 6th time. And I've seen how they work at the treatment facility where this waste would be treated. They do a great job. They're efficient. They've got their system down because they've moved through a lot of waste. And I think that means that Hanford folks should come and study what they do. Whether these people go there or not, they'll probably move to something else, but they're doing a good job. Hanford can come and study how we do it and take the knowledge back to Hanford. It's that simple. We don't need to treat that waste here. Thank you.
Hello, A.G. Wasden. My name is Shauna Sperling, and I'm a Boise resident. I was an academic advisor for international students in Seattle, and I had a student from Fukushima when they had the meltdown. They lost everything. They lost their farm, their house, all their neighbors had to be evacuated. They had to be evacuated. They ended up coming to the U.S. for a while, too. So this is what could happen if we have all this nuclear waste. It's inevitable. Thank you.
My name is Martha Bibb, and I currently live in Hailey, Idaho. I'm a fairly new resident in Idaho. However, I lived fairly close previously to Hanford. And anyway, I'm going to start again by saying accidents happen. And we have nothing in place to deal with accidents of the nature that could occur with nuclear waste. It ruins everything permanently. So anyway, why isn't Washington State keeping their own nuclear waste? Why should we be trying to move it from Washington State, drag it through the population centers, plunk it down over our aquifer, try to contain it, and then ship it again? That makes absolutely no sense. We have plenty of money to build a treatment plant in Washington. If we can bail out our soybean farmers We can certainly build treatment plants where each problem exists and then try to work on the problem we've already got here. That's my feeling. Anyway, and why are we throwing science out when it comes to the Department of Environmental Quality? How can we make any decisions if we're ignoring the science, especially in nuclear waste?
My name is Josephine Lowe, and I'm a resident of Blaine County, Idaho. I would like to ask Attorney General Wasden to support the settlement as it is right now and improve upon it if he can. For the past 50 years that I've been aware of nuclear energy production and weapons grade radioactive materials being produced, I have not heard any strategic plan set in any country, let alone in Idaho, for taking care of nuclear waste for 240,000 years. I think of countries like France and Japan, who are dependent upon nuclear energy for their electricity, and I wonder, what are they going to do with their waste and the continuing of the production of nuclear energy and the waste that is contingent upon that. So I feel that because the INL had or has the issue of being above the Snake River aquifer and a fault line being in that area, that there's no question that we should not be receiving any more shipments of other people's, other countries, the military, the other states' waste until we can figure out a long-term strategic plan for what is there already. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Åsa Chandler, spelled ASA. And I've been a member of Snake River Alliance since 1979 or 80. And I strongly support the 1995 agreement. It doesn't make any sense to me that why would we bring in more waste when we haven't cleaned up the old waste. And to place more waste on unstable seismic ground in such a large body of water that so much of Idaho is dependent on it, it's totally insanity. But perhaps Idaho is disposable because we're a small state. Just when they did the nuclear testing in Nevada, they sent it our way. California had too big of a population. Maybe Boise isn't growing fast enough. Maybe we need a lot more people to stop this from coming into Idaho. But enough is enough. And we need to support the agreements that has been made, and maybe be a state in the country that support legality and support people and supports people's health and welfare and support the environment and support our precious water sources. We should really all work on that. So thank you very much.
My name is Karen McCall. I live in Ketchum, and I have been involved in opposing nuclear facilities and production, weapons, and commercial issues since I was in graduate school in Amherst, Massachusetts, when we opposed a commercial nuclear power plant there. And then I came to Idaho and quickly discovered that the issues here were even far more oppressive than they were in Massachusetts, and spoke before a legislative committee in I think 1979 about the dumping of those barrels that were sitting in the aquifer and how they were poisoning the Snake River Plain aquifer. So that was 1979. I've been so grateful to the Snake River Alliance for all the work they've done in these last almost 40 years. I am very opposed to bringing more waste into the state. I think it's a huge mistake. I think that our country is spending money inappropriately, and we should be addressing our environmental issues that are so severe and frightening right now. So I don't believe that we should be bringing any more waste into Idaho. I think that it's a federal issue, even though waste is being accumulated in states, whether it's commercial or military, and the government needs to be taking care of it, so that the government should be putting money towards developing storage sites on site in locales where waste is being produced. So no more waste coming into Idaho.
Jenna Lagergren, Haley, Idaho. I'm so glad to see so many other people making the statement that nuclear waste should be stored where it's produced. I think that it's a national issue for everyone to be taking care of their own nuclear waste. And one of the solutions to minimizing more nuclear waste would be to emphasize more natural alternative energy solutions instead of coal, instead of nuclear. As a nation, we should be focusing our attention on natural alternative energy solutions. And I hope that the Attorney General will keep the 1995 agreement, that no more nuclear waste should come into Idaho for the very fact that the INL is in the middle of our aquifer and our agricultural lands and our water source for the entire southern Idaho region. So, because of the earthquake fault that is active and will be active, we can't afford to have any more waste here that isn't taken care of and contained appropriately, because, as we heard earlier, the threat of an accident is imminent. So that should be the focus of the attention of all of our state officials and all of our federal officials. Thank you.
My name is Bill Hughes, and I live in Haley, Idaho. And I'd like to thank Beatrice for the continuity she's provided the organization over the years. Larry, one of the few politicians that can continue to examine the evidence and consider testimony and actually change his mind. He's persuaded and Donna, my father was a career officer in the military. I got sent back to the Midwest whenever we were stateside to farm with uncles. So that's a spot in my heart. And Lawrence Wasden, I moved from boarding school in England to Twin Falls, Idaho, where I went to school at Robert Stewart Junior High, and a lot of the kids rode their horses to class. So that was, I attribute all my insanity to that transition. Anyway, I remember actually talking to Phil Batt on the phone before this agreement came into place, which is kind of fun. And I had on some site the amount of waste that's stored out there. And real quick, Larry said the site, it represents $650 million, which I would suggest is not very much money when the soybean farmers are looking at a $12 billion bailout. So that's just my position on the value of facilities at the site. And I've got to read because I don't speak often extemporaneously, so I'm not good at it. And I'm a flamethrower. I will warn the people from eastern Idaho. The agreement entered into by the state of Idaho with the Department of Energy stipulated the following 3 conditions. First, all spent fuel will be placed in dry storage by December 31st, 2023, and such facilities will be placed, if technically feasible, at a point not above the Snake River Plain aquifer. This condition of the agreement will not be met because it will be deemed not to be technically feasible by lame excuse specialists employed by the contractors and the Department of Energy. Otherwise, I would recommend storage in the parking lot of the governor's office, which conveniently happens to be a point not above the Snake River Plain aquifer. The second condition, if the DOE fails to remove all spent fuel by 2035, the state may levy a fine of $60,000 per day. If Department of Energy fails to meet any of the agreement milestones at any point, the state may ask the federal court to halt any further spent fuel shipments to the INL. I advise Mr. Wasden to prepare to make this request. Sorry, I modified that. To halt any future spent fuel shipments. I advise Mr. Wasden, I heartily advise Mr. Wasden to be prepared to make this request. Many in this room tonight will be dead by 2035, and if I am still alive, I will perhaps not be able to provide my name preceding comment. I assume Mr. Wasden will have retired by then. The half-life of many of these radioactive contaminants represent virtual immortality relative to the human lifespan. Best of luck to the Snake River Alliance and anyone still believing that this agreement and rule of law arbitrarily applied these days have any impetus whatsoever in changing humanity's race towards self-destruction by a comprehensive environmental degradation. The third condition, if the DOE fails to perform the cleanup activities mandated in the agreement, shipments stop. The agreement also provides substantial incentives for the Department of Energy to open an interim or permanent repository. Once the Department of Energy opens an interim or permanent repository that accepts Idaho's spent fuel, the state may renegotiate the timetable and number of shipments of spent fuel in Idaho. These additional shipments would only be allowed into the state for treatment and prompt removal to a repository. By opening a repository, the Department of Energy would be able to fulfill all of its contractual commitments to accept spent fuel from other locations. The DOE's failure to fulfill these contractual commitments is costing the agency millions of dollars annually. Newsflash: a repository currently exists at massive taxpayer expense in Nevada. Las Vegas is all about glow and shine, and what happens there stays there. An obviously perfect location for waste from the INL. Unfortunately, while Nevada took the billions for construction of a repository, they turned this waste issue into a political football, with Idaho the designated loser, thanks to Kempthorne and Otter. The economic benefits of slopping at the federal trough are all directed to the upper Snake River Valley, where the scale of INL salaries and low cost of living deliver a quality of life and overall economic benefit to that area, to be envied by other working folks in Idaho. Gee, thanks, Brother Crapo. All of this good fortune delivered by the Department of Energy, while the direction of any waterborne contamination of the Snake River Plain aquifer through hydrological processes is away from the home of Idaho's party before country and unabashedly money before the environment senior senator. The economic reality is plain and simple. Agriculture and aquaculture operations downstream from the INL represent a much larger percentage of Idaho's economy than the fat government paychecks provided by the Department of Energy. These operations will no longer be viable as the sources of water upon which they depend are revealed to contain increasing levels of radioactive contamination, making any food produced unfit for human consumption. The following brief two digressions are to validate my final conclusions. Banks and their executives creating a potential global economic disaster with derivatives involving mortgage security were never prosecuted or punished. The financial sector reaping huge windfall from the recession they themselves created while many of my neighbors lost their homes. Some leaders in this country have proposed the execution of drug dealers as a deterrent in the opioid crisis. Purdue Pharma, manufacturer of OxyContin, while aware of increasing abuse of their product for well over a decade, were shielded from prosecution commensurate to their crimes, executives simply paying fines for charges reduced to misdemeanor. Kurt Vonnegut often wrote, and I quote, "So it goes." The institutions of government may still retain power and authority, but they have lost all credibility. Betrayal of the 1995 agreement negotiated between the state of Idaho and the Department of Energy, simply another example of money and convenience taking priority over the environment and the law. Man, the only creature to gleefully poop toxic radioactive excrement right where he and his neighbors sleep, further sealing the unfortunate destiny of our planet and its children. Idaho should immediately and forever refuse to allow any shipments of nuclear waste into the state and insist the conditions stipulated in the 1995 agreement be honored.
Thank